About a month ago, I heard about the passing of Alan Walden. His biggest claim to fame was being manager of Otis Redding and Lynyrd Skynyrd. Him and his brother Phil, a couple of the pioneers of what we now think of as Southern rock. And I had read his obituary and thought he seemed really interesting, and then found out that he had a book out. He'd written a biography, so I bought it. And I want to share some of that with you guys today. It's very, very interesting. It's called Southern Man, Music and Mayhem in the American South, a memoir by Alan Walden with S.E. Feinberg. And one of the things that I found most interesting about his obituary was that he claimed he was looking for a band to manage, and he had auditioned 187 different bands, and Lynyrd Skynyrd is the band that he chose out of that. That stuck with me. So like, how the hell do you, but the logistics of that seem crazy to me. 187 bands in the early 70s. How do you even see that many? So I wanted to read about that. And I'm going to kind of walk you up to that and how he got Lynyrd Skynyrd their first record deal. So to give you an idea where Alan Walden was in his life, he just lost his best friend and his client, the great Otis Redding, in a plane crash. Had a lot of financial setbacks after that, and was just kind of trying to find his way in the world. And he'd bottomed out and wanted to start over and wanted to start with a new band. And in his words, he says, "I wanted to find my band and very much expected to control the publishing. Publishing is everything. Songs, that's the secret of success. Songs. You want to own the songs." He's right about that. He goes on and says, "My dream was to be like Brian Epstein and the Beatles and Colonel Parker with Elvis Presley. Elvis stuck with the Colonel, and the Beatles stuck with Epstein after success. I wanted to be like them. I wanted one band and to worry only about that one band, put my heart and soul into that one band." And so I went out and auditioned 187 bands in 1 year. That's a lot of bands, 13 to 17 bands in a day sometimes. I covered Louisiana, Alabama, Tennessee, North and South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, and even went as far up as Toronto and Quebec City in Canada. He says, "The audition and travel scene of trying to find my perfect act was driving me even broker than I was, but I wanted to make sure I got the right one. I knew the band was out there somewhere. I traveled the country looking for bands and had my share of burgers, cheap steaks, and lonely hotel rooms. I was looking for magic." He says, "On my first trip out on auditions, I went to Jacksonville, Florida, to an old warehouse. We had 13 bands there set up by a Mercer student. A young man was a very straight-up type guy, and he didn't want anybody smoking grass or anything like that. He did a good job of organizing the scene. Skynyrd was band number 13. Ronnie Van Zant, Alan Collins, Gary Rosington, Larry Junstrom, and Bob Burns. They came out with both barrels loaded. Alan Collins was down on the floor doing splits, playing behind his neck, upside down, every gimmick he could think of. He was always the one on stage moving. They did a fantastic audition, and that audition included Freebird. I made a note about the group and the song, something to definitely think about. After they finished, I told them that I was very impressed, but I had other bands to hear. I explained that I was still going to audition a lot of bands, but if they could stay with me and show me that they could hold up on the road for a bit longer, then I would be back." And they understood. Said, "By chance, do any of you boys have a joint?" And then 5 or 6 joints came flying at me. I'm curious what Freebird was like in that audition, whether it was fully realized as we've heard it on the recordings now, and how long they played it. I could see them playing it for quite a while. He says, "At the end, I did come back to band number 13, Lynyrd Skynyrd. I also wanted a band called Orgone Zabel." He explains that Orgone Zabel, I'm going to be honest, I had never heard of this band before. Some of you, I'm sure, have the record or whatever, but I didn't know about it. Orgone Zabel had a singer named Mickey Thomas. Mickey Thomas is the guy that I knew about this, is the guy that you hear singing on Elvin Bishop's I Fooled Around and Fell in Love. And then he later joined Jefferson Starship, or they may have just been called Starship by then. He's the guy that you hear on Jane. My big memory of that is the video where Paul Kantner was playing a BC Rich. That's the first time I remember seeing, is it a Mockingbird? It's the first time I remember seeing a BC Rich guitar. And it was wood grain, and it seemed really cool in his hands. And then later, it ended up being what all of the, the rocker, 80s rocker bands, a lot of them were using that, and then it didn't seem as cool to me anymore. But in Paul Kantner's hand, it seemed cool. I'm getting off subject. So I'll jump forward a little bit. He says, I started making demos for Lynyrd Skynyrd and Orgone Zabel at David Johnson's Broadway Sound. He says that wasn't working out, so he ended up moving the bands over to Muscle Shoals Sound. We had a week to record all of our demos. It was good to renew my relationship with Jimmy. He was so far ahead. Skynyrd worked the graveyard, and Orgone Zabel worked in the day. So Lynyrd Skynyrd was recording overnight, and Orgone Zabel was recording during the day. Orgone Zabel went home at night. Jimmy produced Skynyrd, and Barry Beckett produced Orgone Zabel. We kind of gave Orgone Zabel the first-class treatment. They had an apartment with a television and a girl cooking for them, and they even slept in beds, first class all the way. And then comes Skynyrd. Lynyrd Skynyrd slept in a second-rate truck stop motel without even a television in the room. There was nothing to do but play basketball on a hoop nailed to a wall against the back of the motel. They walked to the market and bought a huge jar of peanut butter and bread. And for that week, they returned from the all-night sessions, ate peanut butter sandwiches, shot hoops, drank, and slept. Ronnie would go over to the studio in the day to learn as much as he could from being around the master, Jimmy Johnson. They didn't have any money. I didn't flaunt any money in front of them because I wanted to see how strong they really were. They were very strong. They were talented, and they had great attitudes. That's the combination that unlocks the mystery to success in the music business. I feel like these seem like obvious things, but if you're a manager and you're about to put your entire life into a project, you really, really need to know that the people that you're about to invest into are willing to really go all the way, and invest in themselves. I can't overstate that. And he says, we got to the end of the week, and I met with Barry Beckett and the band, and I listened to 3 very good songs from Orgone Zabel. We got 3 good ones, Barry told me, but the songs didn't have anything that showed the magic of being hits. They were tight, very good songs, but they weren't great songs. Then we met with Jimmy Johnson. How many songs did you get with Skynyrd? I asked. He says, we got 14 songs. We listened, and they were all tight as a tick. Every song was slamming in the head, every song a potential hit. That made up my mind to cut Orgone Zabel loose and run with Lynyrd Skynyrd. I had found my band. Orgone Zabel did 3 songs in a week, recording studio. Lynyrd Skynyrd came up with 14. There's something I want to say that struck me when I read this about Mickey Thomas has like the traditionally great voice where he has a really high range, and he probably sings, he seems like he sings really precisely, just a really, really great singer. When you think of traditional rock singers, with the range that people don't have, most people don't have. That's interesting to me that Alan Walden understood that Ronnie Van Zant's voice, if it doesn't have a lot of range, he doesn't do a lot with it as far as the gymnastics vocally or whatever. But Alan Walden had the understanding and the wisdom to know that there was so much more to singing than to have, just a bunch of range or whatever. Like Ronnie Van Zant wrote songs that related to people, and he delivered them. That's the only thing, if you're a singer, that's really the only thing you have to do. Being on key is optional, I think. I think a big gymnastic vocal range is nice, but if I don't believe you, if you don't sing songs in a way that people believe it and they feel it, then what's the point in it? And Ronnie Van Zant was able to take an idea, a feeling, emotion, or whatever, and sing it in a way that his people believed it. He delivered it. That's all the song. That's all there is to the song, and I think it's beautiful. That's why Alan Walden was a great finder of talent, as he understood that. A lot of you are thinking right now that I'm putting down Ronnie Van Zant's voice, and I'm not. I'm actually complimenting it quite a lot, and I hope you understand where I'm coming from on that. A lot of you out there who are playing in bands and singing and not feeling good about your voice, your only job is to make people feel something, is to deliver that. And it doesn't matter if you don't have a huge vocal range. Just make people believe you. Believe it yourself, and be real, and it'll go a long way. So I think my camera lens is steaming up here a little bit. I apologize for that, but it's very humid here in the Nashville heat. But he goes on to talk about how hard it was to get Lynyrd Skynyrd a record deal. And they were turned down by Capricorn, his own brother, as well as Atlantic, Columbia, Warner's, A&M, RCA, Epic, Elektra, Polydor, all turned Skynyrd down. They said several times it looked like there was no way in hell Lynyrd Skynyrd would get a record deal because there were too many people taking a pass. Negativity spreads in the record business. That's the truth, man. If you get that stench of failure on you, that's a hard thing to shake. Everybody else can smell it and they don't want to be around it. If they think that you're winning and things are going good for you, people want to be part of that. It's a very fickle business. But something in the back of my mind kept telling me that the record companies were wrong and I was right. That spirit kept driving me, kept me being a force. Maybe it had something to do with making the right decision standing out in the cotton field on my way home from Muscle Shoals. He had a literal come to Jesus moment. It says, when you believe in something hard enough, you can't be beat and you can't be torn up. You can't be destroyed. There are too many great artists who never made it to the top of the mountain because of getting beat back so much. They gave up because they couldn't take it anymore, and I can't blame any of them. It had nothing to do with talent. Bear in mind, they turned down Skynyrd after hearing Gimme 3 Steps, Simple Man, and Freebird. Don't ever give up. So he's out there shopping, Gimme 3 Steps, Simple Man, and Freebird, and the record companies are saying no. So I'm going to skip ahead quite a bit here. There's a lot of stories that he put in of Lynyrd Skynyrd getting into bar fights with people, Ronnie Van Zant fighting people and beating them up and all of this stuff, and being a tough guy and always very quick to get drunk and fight. And it's interesting, and sometimes it's even entertaining, but it's also pretty sad, man. It's a hard, rough way to go through life, and it's not necessary, but I get it. They came from rough areas and they had a rough road, so they became rough people. There's a point to all of this, I'm going to say. Before I get completely to that point, I think it's interesting. I heard an interview with David Johansen years ago. I believe it was with Terry Gross on Fresh Air on NPR. And she asked something about, who did you guys the New York Dolls, who did you used to tour with back in the day? And he said that they did quite a few very long tours opening for Lynyrd Skynyrd. And she said something like, that does not seem like a good combination. And David Johansen said, actually, it was great. He said that Lynyrd Skynyrd was some of our best friends in the world. The audience, you probably had to be pretty close up to be able to tell that they were a glam band, dressed in women's clothes and all of that. And but when you got back from the stage, you could hear they were a rock and roll band, and the audiences were there for the rock and roll. And Lynyrd Skynyrd and the New York Dolls got along great. I'm only saying that because sometimes things are not everything that you think they are. Sometimes they are. But so it's possible for Skynyrd to be fighting in bars every night and all of that stuff, and also be able to be friends with the guys that are in a glam band and play rock and roll with you. Just throwing that in there. But back to them trying to get a record deal. Here comes MCA. It says Al Kooper and Skynyrd got together one night at Finuccio's. Al happened to waltz in wearing a white mink coat past people who were lucky to be wearing shoes. Al requested to jam with the band. Why not? Al Kooper was a legend. Skynyrd let him come up and jam. This black-haired Jewish guy from Brooklyn. Al had paid his dues to jam on any stage with any group in the world, and that was fine with me. After the session, we sat down, and Al explained that he was starting a label called Sounds of the South, and that he was definitely interested in producing Lynyrd Skynyrd's album. The problem started, and I could see that the company was going to tie the band down every way they could. Al Kooper made a deal with MCA for Skynyrd. I met the band over at the Macon Coliseum parking lot and had all the contracts spread out on the hood of my '73 Ford pickup with a gun rack in the back and a cooler of beer in the truck bed. You can't write this stuff. If you saw it in a movie, you wouldn't believe it. He says the deal Al made for them was terrible. Ronnie asked me, "What do you think of our record deal?" "It's the worst piece of shit I've ever seen." That's what he says. That's what his manager told him. Ronnie asked straight up, "What do you think about it?" to his manager. His manager says it's the worst piece of shit I have ever seen. Ronnie says, "What else do we have?" And Alan says, "Nothing." I told Ronnie, "But with this contract, you've got less." So it's one thing to have nothing, but if you sign this contract, you have less than nothing. Ronnie says, "Give me that damn pen," and then he signed the contract. Later, Ronnie and Ed King wrote a song called Working for MCA because that's what they ended up doing. But I found this part pretty interesting because the tough guy who will beat up people in a bar asked his manager, the person who, he's trusted his life to give this kind of advice, the thing that his manager actually knows about, what he thought of it. His manager said, "Don't sign it," and he signed it anyway. I don't know. Seems like with some of the songs they'd written, sooner or later, I would hope to think that they would have got a shot if they kept going. I don't know. It's very complicated. I'm curious what you think about that. I like to encourage people to read books. But a lot of people don't have a lot of history of that, and they might get a book, and it's just written really flowery. You feel like it's Dostoevsky or something. This is written in very plain English, like if you're talking to your buddy over at a bar and telling some fun rock and roll stories. They're short vignettes. You could pick it up anywhere, flip to a page, and there's something interesting there. And I don't know, maybe this would be a good one for you to start with. I get nothing out of this. I bought the book. This is me admitting something. I bought the book, and then I came down and I filmed. I'm here at the park in East Nashville. I filmed the stuff down by the river. Had a good time, all the pretty B-roll. I set the book down and started doing something else, and a few hours later I realized I left the book by the boat ramp, and it was gone. And I had to go buy it again. So this is 2 weeks later. I bought it again, and it finally showed up. So this is the second one. I've bought 2 of these dang things. I get nothing from it other than, hopefully if you guys enjoy it, you might enjoy this video or whatever. So you might even be able to find a used copy on eBay or something. I don't know. I enjoyed the book, so I decided I would talk about it. I mentioned before that Alan Walden's brother Phil was involved with the Allman Brothers. He's one of the reasons we know about them, and Capricorn Records and all of that. I did an interview last winter with Jeff Hanna of the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, went over to his house and had a great time, great conversation. And he's told me about his friendship with Dwayne Allman way back when. He knew Dwayne Allman before the Allman Brothers blew up. I think when they were still the Hourglass. I'm going to put that video up right here. I think you'll enjoy it. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely enjoy that. I'm going to go find some air conditioning and cool off a little bit. And until then, I'll see you guys somewhere down the road. Much love to you.